It's April 16th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with the stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with tariff talks between the United States and the European Union. The U.S. and EU trade talks took place in Washington, D.C. on Tuesday. For the first time since the EU delayed its countermeasures against the U.S. tariffs to mid-July, but made a little progress in narrowing their trade differences. And U.S. President Donald Trump says he's open to making a trade deal with China, but only when Beijing makes the first move, saying the ball is in China's court on tariffs. 3 candidates from the Democratic Party of Korea and 11 from the People Power Party have registered to run in the June 3rd presidential election. The PPP is set to announce the list of candidates advancing to the first round of the primary on Wednesday. The U.S. and EU held their long-due tariff talks on Tuesday, but only to make minimal progress in bridging their differences. Our Park Kwon-woo starts us off.
EU trade officials met with their U.S. counterparts in Washington, D.C. on Monday to reach a deal on tariffs, but were unable to bridge gaps in their stances on trade. According to the European Commission on Tuesday, the EU's proposal of 040 reciprocal tariffs on industrial goods, including cars, along with non-tariff barriers, were among the main items on the agenda. It added talks about overcapacity in steel and aluminum, and the resilience of supply chains in semiconductors and pharmaceutical sectors were also part of the talks. And the EU emphasized it would not budge on standards, standing firm on red lines including food, health, and safety, as well as regulations regarding technology and the digital market. European Commission spokesperson Olive Gill urged the U.S. to clarify its stance, saying the EU is doing its part and more engagement from Washington is needed to keep the process moving. Following Monday's meeting, EU Trade Commissioner Maros Sefcovic posted on social media saying a significant joint effort from both sides would be needed to reach a fair deal, adding that the EU is ready. Officials from the U.S. Trade Representative's office reportedly did not respond to requests for comments on the U.S. stance following the meeting. With the EU's 90-day pause on retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods set to last until July 14th, EU officials say further measures are also being discussed internally in case no agreement is reached by then. Park Kwon-woo, Arirang News.
In the meantime, U.S. President Donald Trump continues to press China that it's up to Beijing to come to the negotiating table over tariffs, leaving the ball in China's court. Lee Seung-jae has more.
The 2 biggest economies in the world have been going blow for blow on tariffs, with China imposing 125% tariffs on U.S. goods, while the U.S. has imposed tariffs of up to 145% on Chinese imports. With neither side backing down, U.S. President Donald Trump believes it's up to China to come to the negotiating table.
The president has made his position on China quite clear, although I do have an additional statement that he just shared with me in the Oval Office. The ball is in China's court. China needs to make a deal with us. We don't have to make a deal with them.
The White House press secretary added that there's no difference between China and any other country, except they are much larger, noting that other countries have initiated trade talks first. Levitt also pointed to the strength of the U.S. consumer market as leverage against China. While trade tensions between Washington and Beijing have been brewing for years, the situation has worsened since Trump took office in January. While it started off with the U.S. leader imposing tariffs on Chinese goods over its alleged role in the fentanyl trade, it's gone beyond that, with Trump imposing additional tariffs on top of duties from previous administrations. Not only has China imposed its own massive tariffs against U.S. goods, but it's also using its rare earth supplies as leverage. Consumers fear the tariff war between the 2 countries will only escalate further, with no sign of talks from either country. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
South Korean Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok is set to visit the U.S. next week for trade talks with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. According to Yonhap News Agency on Wednesday, Choi's trip comes in response to a meeting proposal from U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. The report follows Bessent's interview with Bloomberg TV on Monday, where he said Washington would hold trade negotiations with South Korea next week. The Wall Street Journal also reported earlier this week that the Trump administration is prioritizing negotiations with 5 countries, including South Korea and Japan. And one thing after another, South Korea is now officially a sensitive country to the U.S. as of Tuesday. How can it be removed from the sensitive country list? We are joined by Professor Choi Sang-mi this morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
So what is a sensitive country to begin with, according to the U.S.? I mean, what guidelines does the U.S. lay out for a sensitive country?
The United States use the term sensitive country to refer to the nation that is considered to carry security risk, especially in the field of science and technology. This doesn't mean that country is hostile, but that the U.S. sees a higher chance that sensitive information like a military-related technology or high-end data system could be leaked, misused, or transferred to the countries that are strategic competitor. So when a country is on the list, and the researchers and institutions from that country may face tighter restriction. For example, they might need extra background checks or be blocked from accessing certain U.S. labs or technologies. So these rules are designed to protect the U.S. National interests, especially in areas like artificial intelligence, semiconductors, and cybersecurity.
It all started with visitors to U.S. labs who reportedly mishandled sensitive information. That's what the U.S. argues. But Professor Choi, as you know, there are doubts over the designation. Is that a justifiable reason to designate South Korea as a sensitive country?
According to the U.S. official, there have been a few cases where researchers from South Korea, as you said, while visiting U.S. labs, failed to properly handle sensitive information. This might include sharing restricted data with unauthorized people or not following security rules. So while these instances are serious, many experts argue that such a rare and individual mistake should not justify placing the entire country under broad restrictions. In other words, punishing a whole country because a few individuals made in errors may be too heavy-handed. So mistake can happen in any nation, and most research institutions have internal systems to prevent such issues.
Well, you briefly mentioned this. The designation is concerning all because it'll impair bilateral cooperation, especially in science and technology, and pose economic limitations. What kind of restrictions should we expect? I heard it's going to be a lot more trickier for researchers to enter U.S. science-related, firms and labs, right?
Yes, being labeled in a sensitive country could lead to real consequences for science and industry, as you said. For instance, Korean researchers may face stricter visa rules or lose access to joint research projects in key fields like biotechnology, AI, and quantum computing. Korean companies might also find it harder to partner with U.S. tech firms or receive American investment. Given that South Korea is a global leader in advanced industry, especially semiconductors, this could limit innovation, reduce Korea's ability to compete globally. So the decision may also impact the students and academics by creating barrier to research exchange.
Well, Professor Choi, I have to ask, does the designation have anything to do with Trump's tariffs? I mean, will it get in the way of South Korea-U.S. tariff negotiations?
As you know, the U.S. recently signaled higher tariffs on Korean products, especially in manufacturing and defense-related sectors. So if the trust between the two countries weakens due to this designation, it could make a trade negotiation more difficult. In diplomacy and economics, trust is a key, as you know. Strained relationship over research policy might spill over into trade and investment discussion, potentially delaying or complicating future agreements.
Professor Choi, experts I've spoken to say it's going to take some time for South Korea to get rid of that, get rid of itself from that list. But how can the designation be dropped? In what way can that be done?
Actually, the designation is not permanent, so US and South Korea have already started discussion to resolve this issue quickly. South Korea can respond by strengthening internal safeguard for research cooperation, improving transparency, and showing that its institutions follow US security rules. If the US sees enough progress, it can be moved from remove Korea from the list. However, this process may take time as it involves, multiple U.S. government departments and careful review of risk. So open communication and evidence-based reassurance will be critical.
Professor Cho, I have to ask, how long are we saying? Weeks or months?
we cannot expect that. As I told you, all kind of progress made before that Korea removes from the list.
Alrighty, Professor Cho, thank you so much for sharing your insight with us this morning. You have a wonderful day.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
The candidate list for the presidential primaries is now complete. 3 from the Democratic Party and 11 from the People Power Party. Now, those from the PPP who will advance to the first round of the primary will be announced today on Wednesday. Our Kim Do-yeon reports.
The official registration for candidacy for the upcoming presidential election closed for both parties on Tuesday. The Democratic Party of Korea has 3 contestants, while the People Power Party has 11. The DP's race is largely seen as predictable, with its former chair Lee Jae-myung set to take the party's ticket. However, Kim Kyung-soo, former Gyeongsangnam-do Province Governor, and Kim Dong-yeon, current Gyeonggi-do Province Governor, are in their own right heavyweight politicians. With just 1 day to go until the first regional voting opens for electors of the Chungcheongdo provinces, candidates continue to promote their bids. Lee released an interview with Nomuyan Foundation's YouTube channel. Kim Kyung-soo, after handing in the registration paper himself, met with small business owners in Gyeonggi-do province. Kim Dong-yeon held a meeting to follow up on his visit to the U.S. to deal with U.S. tariffs, focusing on the auto industry. Both of them are non-Lee Jae-myung faction politicians in the DP with backers of their own. Meanwhile, with many more contestants for People Power Party, in a week the list will be cut down to 4 in the first round cutoff. Among the registered 8 notable contestants are Kim Moon-soo, the latest labor minister, 4-term lawmaker An Chol-soo, former PPP chair Han Dong-hoon, the latest Daegu mayor Hong Jun-pyo, 5-term lawmaker Na Kyung-won, Incheon mayor Yu Jong-bok, Gyeongsangbuk-do Province Governor Lee Cheol-woo, and former lawmaker Yang Yang-ja. With the media day for the runners coming up on Wednesday, candidates promoted their bids. Han Dong-hoon, Hong Jun-pyo, and Na Kyung-won shared detailed pledges and visions. Kim Moon-soo and Lee Cheol-woo went to visit former President Park Chung-hee's memorial. What they all had in common, however, was their messages against the DP's Lee Jae-myung as he leads the polls to become the next president. They unilaterally criticized Lee's ongoing legal battles and said that his pledges are too liberal. All in all, the final candidate will be chosen within a couple of weeks. For DP, the final candidate is likely to be decided by April 27th, with E expected to take more than 50% of the final votes. For the PPP, if a candidate takes more than 50% of votes in the second round, then it'll end on April 29th. If not, there's a runoff on May 3rd. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Movies and dramas from South Korea are the second most watched content on Netflix worldwide. According to global media analytics firm Ampere on Tuesday, Korean content has maintained the number 2 position behind the U.S. since 2023, accounting for nearly 10% of global viewership on the platform. The report said strong content production capabilities and licensing strategies were key factors behind the success. It also cited shows including Squid Game and Culinary Class Wars as standout examples. The UK and Japan followed in 3rd and 4th place on the list. Wednesday marks 11 years since the tragic Sewol Ferry disaster, which claimed the lives of 304 people, most of them high school students. The April 16th Foundation will hold a memorial service at 10:30 a.m. on a boat close to where the ferry sank in Jindogun, Jeollanam-do Province. The memorial service will include the reading out of the names of the victims and speeches given by family members. Other organizations will hold memorial services all over the country, including in Ansan, Gyeonggi-do Province, where most of the victims were students at Danwon High School. A memorial service will also be held at the Sewol Ferry Memorial Hall in Pyeongmokhang Port, near the disaster site from 1 p.m. Up next, we share with you the story of one elderly man who is seeking emotional closure through a generous donation to help defectors build a new home here in South Korea. Our Kim Jong-sil has his story.
89-year-old Yang An-jong's life reflects the deep pain and division that has shaped Korea for decades. His story, filled with personal tragedy, is one shared by many families torn apart by the invisible line that divides North and South Korea. In 1947, when Yang was only 11, his father, a respected intellectual, made the life-changing decision to defect to North Korea. This left Yang, his mother, and 5 siblings behind in the South. The family's world was shattered and poverty took over. Yang's father's name became a source of shame.
I was just a child when my father went over to the north. My mother, at 33, was left alone to raise 6 children. We lived in a small room, so poor it's hard to describe.
Despite everything, Yang's resilience was stronger than the weight of his sorrow. In Seoul, during the 1970s and 1980s, he built a successful life running Sansugapsan, a classical music nightclub that became a haven for the city's artistic community. But even in success, the memory of his father and the division within Korea never really faded. It wasn't until later in life that Yang found peace by giving back. Earlier this month, Yang's donation was recognized at Hanawon, a South Korean center helping North Korean defectors. His contribution of 1 billion won, or about $700,000, will be distributed as around $500 per person each month until the fund is used up. For Yang, this is about more than just financial help. It's about giving North Korean defectors a fresh start.
I hope this small donation will help North Korean defectors build new lives here. The South is different from the North. Here, you can make something of yourself with your own efforts, and I want them to feel that possibility, that they can dream again.
Yang's family is equally proud of his decision. Choi Han-chul, Yang's stepson, voiced his full support.
I am very proud of my father. I think that the money will be greatly helpful to the people who evacuated from North Korea.
In his later years, Yang has found a way to bridge the gap, turning his painful past into something lasting and meaningful for others. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
Now, let's take a look at some stories from around the world with our Choi Ji-hee. Good morning, Ji-hee.
Good morning, Tammy.
Ji-hee, let's start with the ongoing Gaza war. Now, apparently, Hamas has rejected the Israel's latest ceasefire proposal. Philison.
That's right. So a senior Palestinian official said Hamas rejected a new Israeli ceasefire offer that demanded the disarmament of the group. The ceasefire presented by Israel to Hamas through mediators Egypt and Qatar on Monday reportedly included the disarmament of Hamas as a condition for the first time. However, on Tuesday, Hamas is said to have rejected the offer, labeling the disarmament clause a red line for the group and asserting that it will not surrender its weapons under any circumstances. The offer also included a 6-week truce and a phased release of more hostages. Hamas insists that any agreement must include a permanent end to hostilities and a complete withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza. The rejection of the ceasefire proposal comes amid ongoing negotiations in Cairo, which have yet to yield a breakthrough. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made an unannounced visit to northern Gaza to encourage troops, marking a rare appearance in the conflict zone. On Tuesday local time, Netanyahu met with Israeli troops accompanied by Defense Minister Israel Katz and top military officials. He received briefings on ongoing operations aimed at dismantling Hamas and securing the release of hostages. Netanyahu reiterated Israel's commitment to achieving its war objectives, stating, "We're fighting for our existence, we're fighting for our future." During his visit, he also addressed a recent statement by Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, saying that Iran's calls for Israel's destruction show the existential nature of the conflict. In the United States, President Donald Trump threatened to revoke Harvard's tax-exempt status on Tuesday, accusing the university of promoting political agendas contrary to public interest. The Trump administration has frozen over $2.2 billion in federal grants and contracts to Harvard after the university rejected demands to overhaul its academic programs, including eliminating diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives and increasing cooperation with federal immigration authorities. Harvard's president hit back, saying the university will not surrender its independence or its constitutional rights. Former President Barack Obama praised Harvard's stance and urged other institutions to defend academic independence. Finally, in France, President Emmanuel Macron honored 101 individuals who played significant roles in the restoration of Notre-Dame de Paris on Tuesday local time. The ceremony at the Élysée Presidential Palace coincided with the 6th anniversary of the devastating fire at the cathedral in 2019. Among the honorees were carpenters, ironworkers, scaffolders, organ restorers, and dozens of other craftspeople recognized for their contributions. Prestigious awards presented by Macron included Legion of Honor and the National Order of Merit. Commander of the Legion of Honor, France's highest public distinction, was bestowed upon Philippe Host, who supervised the reconstruction.
Many people wore winter jackets yesterday while walking the sidewalks filled with spring blossoms. But we could be shaking off that chill with a pleasant warm-up today. Those afternoon temperatures are really going to bounce back, rising a good 8 degrees Celsius warmer than yesterday here in the capital. But with this big swing in temperatures, we're looking at a significant daily temperature range of about 10 to 15 degrees Celsius in most parts of Korea. So layering will be a good idea. Meanwhile, the wind will still be a bit of a factor today. Jeju Island in particular could see some pretty strong winds. So a strong wind advisory is likely there. And come afternoon, we're talking highs of 22 degrees Celsius here in the capital, and over in Chuncheon, Daejeon, Gwangju will be topping out at 24 degrees under bright skies with decent air quality nationwide all day today. And do expect temperatures to remain generally warmer than average for the next few days. However, we do have rain in the forecast for Saturday. But for today, enjoy the warmth and sunshine.
That is all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Thanks for watching.